ध्वनिर्वर्णा पदम् वाक्यमित्यास्पद चतुष्टयम् यस्याः सूक्ष्मादिभेदे वाग्देवीं तामुपास्महे।
The Electronic Media Production and Research Center EMPRC of Madhya Pradesh Bhoj Open University presents an audio program of English literature. This audio program will be useful to the student of BA first year. This audio program is based on the second unit of first paper titled Literature in English from 1550 to 1750 AD. The title of program is John Donn as a Poet. To deliver the lecture on this topic, we have invited our subject expert, Dr. Vikas Jaulkar. Sound edited and presented by Amar Bahadur Yadav. Now let's listen to the audio program, John Donn as a Poet.
Hello students, welcome to this lecture which is being presented to you, and today's topic is John Donn as a poet. Students, you must have undergone certain poems of John Donn which are in your course content also. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about John Donn as a poet. Students, when you are reading the poems of John Donn, you must have come across certain words and their meanings you must have found very difficult. Yes, students, John Donn is a very difficult poet to understand, but doesn't mean we are going to discuss about his poems and also certain characteristic features of John Donn as a poet. Students, this lecture is being presented to you as students of BA1 English Literature, paper being first. The course content is in Unit 2 under the heading Poetry, C section. Students, before we start our lecture, we expect you to learn certain things from this lecture, and the objectives being state the personality of John Donn. Here we intend to discuss about John Donn's personality in very brief, and list the works of John Donn, that means poetical works of John Donn. Describe John Donn as a poet, that means in this part we shall be discussing about the characteristic features of John Donn as a poet. Describe the concept of figures of speech. Figures of speech are very difficult things in literature. We expect you to have an idea about what figures of speech are because they are used mostly in poems. Now the main points. Before we discuss, students, it is necessary for you to have an idea as to what we are going to discuss about. So, to facilitate you, we are giving certain main points. Life and education of John Donn in brief. Love and marriage, because these are the integral parts of anyone's life. Poetical works, he is a poet, that means you must know certain works of John Donn as poetical works. Donn is a love poet. We shall be discussing at length about John Donn as a love poet, but here you must know that we are also to discuss about his love poetry. His religious poetry, John Donn is very obscure. and his religious poetry is also very obscure. He talks of soul and a lot number of things which are very imaginative, and the concrete imagery has been used by him. His satires, you have already undergone satires of, yes, Dryden and Pope. His elegies, you know? Okay, doesn't matter. We shall be discussing about it in our lesson. His epithalamias, very difficult words. Yes, but we shall be discussing about it. To facilitate you, we shall be discussing certain other important points. That is the theme of soul, again, obscurity in John Donne's poetry. And then we shall be recapitulating, that means summarizing the entire session for your convenience. Students, it's necessary that you take out your notebooks and pen or pencil and try to write down certain points which are of significance to you, so that you can make use of these in examination purposes, and also to have an idea as to what John Donne was all about. Brief introduction. See the students, John Donne, a remarkable personality of 17th century, 1572 1631. Okay, doesn't matter, you are not going to understand anything only reading the poems, but we shall be discussing, rather we shall be facilitating you in understanding John Donne as a poet. Born at London in 1572, he was brought up as a Roman Catholic and got education at Oxford in 1584, Cambridge in 1587, and Lincoln's Inn in 1592. This chronological order is very necessary for you to have an idea as to what Donne has undergone, with special reference to his studies. Received Anglican orders in 1615 and was appointed reader in divinity. Divinity, a religious poet. Catholic, a Roman Catholic of highest order, and all these words are necessary to understand in order to appreciate him as a person and also Donne as a poet. In 1601, he married his master's niece and more. And do you know certain other things about him? You shall be highly surprised to know that he lost his wife in 1617, leaving behind 7 young children. 7 young children. The state of affairs, John Donne must have seen a very difficult life in later years. In 1621, he was elevated to Dean of St. Paul's Church. That means a very important, a very significant development in his life. After 3 years, he suffered a dangerous attack of illness. A father of 7 children, a lot number of economic and other problems, and ultimately suffered a dangerous attack of illness. Poetical works. John Donne is known for his religious and obscure poetical works, and some important poetical works include a lot number of poems. You must be well aware of the fact that most of his poems not published until 1633, and manuscripts were circulated except the first anniversary and the second anniversary, again the names of the collections of a lot number of poems, and were known as The Progress of the Soul, which were published in between 1611 and 1612. He started composing poems during expedition to Cadiz and the Azores in 1597. That means after getting married, he had been to these places. The Storm and the Calm were composed in 1597, and he fell in love, eloped with Anne More and married her in 1601. This is important. And what's more important is that he was imprisoned for love, that means doing love was not a happy affair. And since he was a Roman Catholic, you could well understand the state of affairs with John Donne. Donne is a love poet now. Let us discuss about John Donne's love poetry. All his love poems, students, are songs and sonnets. Songs which can easily be, that's true, sung. And sonnets, what are sonnets? Right, poems of 14 lines, sonnets. Can you name another sonnet of the Elizabethan age? That's right, Shakespeare. That's true, Shakespeare. They are intense in mood and vivid in the language. That means love and also the intense mood, they go hand in hand. And for that, the expression of it, vivid language, was also necessary, which Donne used very well. He used echoing words. You know echoing words? Yes, that's true. Poetry and also echoing words, they again go hand in hand, and without that, there isn't any impression on you also. Today's poetry, exactly speaking, it's not that echoing, but in previous years, it was echoing poetry, which could very easily impress upon your ears, your heart, and so on and so forth. See the example here. Then as my soul to heaven her first seat takes flight, an earth-born body in the earth shall dwell. This is my place last. No? This is my place last? This is one of the poems in your course content, students. So you must also read the entire piece of poem. Since vivid speech and delicate emotions were there, that's how he was a very important love poet of metaphysical age or 17th century. This is also important because sonnets first appeared in Italy in 13th century. And John Donne belonged to which century? He belonged to 17th century. That means he went to the 13th century and got and received models from certain poems and the poets, and that is how he used sonnet to suit his own purpose. Other poets, right? Other poets, Shakespeare, Keats and Hopkins. Keats, Ode to Nightingale. It's in your course content, students. You must have an idea about all these also. Three kinds of lyrics. Lyric, which can be sung. Themes of these lyrics, sensuality and cynical themes, and the example being love's alchemy. Emotional and argumentative, both are in your course content. And satirical, about poets and lawyers. Satire, you know, you have already undergone Dryden's and Pope's satires. That's true. Dryden was very personal, very subjective in writing satires. But Pope was very objective in writing satires. Though both belong to the same age, but there was a marked difference between the writing of satirical poems. His love poems include, what are those? The anniversaries. We are talking of titles only. The good morrow, the ecstasy, the canonization, a new philosophy, an example of scholarship. What scholarship here? Scholasticism. This is a word which is now and then used or associated with John Donne. All the poets of this philosophy were intellectuals. So the example of scholarship is being stated. Experience made him a love poet. It is said that John Donne had certain relationship with certain ladies, and those relationships made him a love poet of great order. His love poems show intense personal moods. That means unless it is the person concerned or the intensity of the love in a person, such love poems cannot be composed. And a lot number of moods have been presented in love poems of John Donne. Donne as a religious poet. You know, he was a Catholic, a Roman Catholic. And after receiving the Anglican orders, he got himself attached to a religion. Secondly, he lost his wife and was also very sad. Was left away with 7 children also. So, ultimately, John Donne is known as a religious poet. He received his Anglican orders and started writing holy sonnets. Again, sonnets, we have already discussed about other sonnet writer, that means Shakespeare, and holy means again which belong to religion. That means holy sonnets. 19 holy sonnets express his doubt and thinking about divinity. In the previous years, John Donne also enjoyed the life to its fullest satisfaction. You could very well understand what I meant to say. And the divinity made him a poet of a great quality. He started writing religious poems after 1610 and wrote 19 lyrics and holy sonnets. Lyrics, again, a form of poetry. Lyric? Do you have any idea about lyric? Doesn't matter. Lyric is a poem of single emotion. It's a short poem which can easily be sung. So students, you must keep this also in mind, because all these forms, all the figures of speech that we shall be dealing with must be understood properly and used, because literature, they are used time and again. And what's poetry? Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Who said these lines? Ponder over and try to find the answer. Titled to Hymn to God the Father after the poet's wife's death in 1616. That means he was all alone and was very dejected person. All the poems of John Donne are personal and touching because he had undergone a type of experience which made him write the poems of that sort. And all the poems are touching because poet had undergone the experience, and the manner in which he creates the ideas or touches upon the ideas are very touching. There were certain other themes also. For example, a struggle in the mind before taking the Anglican orders, horror of death, and longing for the love of God. Another holy sonnet that must be understood is Better My Heart. This is my place last seen. This is a piece of poem which is in your course content, the third sonnet in holy sonnets. And the theme is the fear of damnation and the hope of redemption. Discusses about the soul and the fear of damnation and the hope of redemption. That means on the one side there is death, and other side there is a point whereby he can have the closeness of the Almighty God. So this is damnation and hope of redemption. Elizabethan metaphor, human beings as players. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player. Yes, Macbeth. Who has written Macbeth? That's correct, Shakespeare. And what is it? That's right, drama. Act 5, Scene 5. That means the philosophy of Elizabethan metaphor, Elizabethan philosophy is being depicted in his poetry. His means despite his satires. Students, we must also understand about the satires of John Donne. What is a satire? Satire is a mode of writing in which public personalities and human weaknesses are ridiculed. See, the word ridiculed or mocked at. Can you give an example of other satirists? That's right. Dryden and Pope. Again, the poems of John Donne and Pope are in your course content. He has written 5 satires, and the earliest satirical poems were written during 1593 and 1598. Perseus the Roman satirist was the model, and other poets we have already discussed, Dryden and Pope as satirists. Tool of satire. What were the subjects on which satires were written? Sarcasm, that's right, regarding persons and also certain aspects. His elegies. What is an elegy? Elegy is a form of poetry, and it is a sorrowful and thoughtful lyrical poem. Again, it's a lyrical poem. That means it is a short poem. Secondly, a poem of single emotion. And thirdly, which can be sung properly. Thoughts about death or a lament or a purse for a person. That means, you know, another elegy writer. I'm talking of John Milton, and his Lycidas is a elegy. Influenced by Ovid and other Roman poets, John Donne got inspiration from Ovid and other Roman poets for writing his elegy. And the features of the elegies written by John Donne: wit, vigor, and imagery. John Donne is known for his far-fetched imagery, which we shall be discussing later on. Here is an example. Death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful. See, firstly, it's a very difficult topic about which John Donne has written, death. Again, an elegy regarding death, where he says, death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, challenging death also. These elegies were written in 1590 and for the first time were published in 1633. All the satires written by John Donne are indecent in nature. And other poets, I've already given you the name, Milton, and another poet, Thomas Gray. The subjects, the anagram, jealousy, the perfume, change, all these topics were covered by John Donne in writing his elegies. Other topics included love and war, and he has used concrete imagery in order to write and give an idea about elegy. His epithalamians. Epithalamion means marriage songs, and they were composed in 3 such songs. The first, the Princess Elizabeth on Valentine's Day. Must be smiling about Valentine. Yeah, you must have an idea as to what type of priest Valentine was. And yeah, you also celebrate the day and call it Valentine's Day. The second, to celebrate the marriage of Earl of Ernst, King of Favorite. And the third, like to a grave. Spenser is also known for writing marriage songs, and John Donne found in him a model also. Theme of Soul. The Progress of the Soul is the title, which was written in 1601, and the theme was the soul of a dead girl on its way to paradise. Can you think of such a theme? Yes, John Donne has written such types of poems. The theme, struggle in the mind of the poet before taking order in the Anglican Church, horror of death, and longing for the love of God. That means death and love again are two important themes. Here we intend to recapitulate, summarize. So, in this lecture, we have discussed about John Donne as a poet and a divine, as a Roman Catholic, as a scholar, and his knowledge, his command over subjects, his use of figures of speech and poetic form. In next lesson, we shall be discussing about the metaphysical aspects of John Donne as a poet. So students, we come to the end of this part, John Donne as a poet.
You are listening an audio program, John Donne as a poet. Subject expert and speaker was Dr. Vikas Jaulkar. Announcer was Prem Sharan Khemaria. This audio program was edited and presented by Amar Bahadur Yadav. This program was produced by the Electronic Media Production and Research Center, EMPRC of Madhya Pradesh Bhoj Open University in association with NITTTR Bhopal.